Amish children get sick so often throughout the year. When I was going to school, there was always at least a couple days throughout the year in the wintertime when there wasn't enough children in school to have school on that day. We would walk to school and then count the children, and it would be half of the children missing from school because they were sick, and so we would have to go home. That was one of our rules. Children are a lot more likely to get foodborne illnesses than adults, and in the Amish, we do not get taught anything about food safety. I was taught how to cook and clean and bake. I worked in an Amish bakery and I was taught how to can, but I was never once taught about food safety, and not once was anything mentioned by anyone around me in the Amish. I worked in the Amish bakery for 2.5 to 3 years. I worked in the back where we would make the food for about a year, and then I moved up to the front where I would be cashier, customer service, helping customers get donuts and fry pies, making cookies, not stirring the dough, just rolling it into balls and baking it, and then bagging the bakery as well. When I worked at the bakery, we were not trained on how to do stuff. We were only told, like, basically do how you were taught at home. When I worked to make the food in the back, we did cookies, bars, breads, salads, donuts, and fry pies. Something that goes with food safety is cross-contamination. Well, I know a lot of stuff that I remember seeing as I was working in the back that was absolutely not safe. But that's how we get taught at home. That's how everyone cooks, so no one knows the difference. The bakery did not have air conditioning because they were not allowed to have air conditioning. So in the wintertime, it was so cold, but that is better for the baked goods. But in the summertime, it was so scorching hot. Sometimes some of us workers almost passed out because we didn't have enough fans for all of us to have a fan. And the bakery was like the next day, sometimes we had bakery that got moldy because we put it in the bags, put it on the shelf, and then it's still like the condensation on the inside of the bags because it's so hot. And I remember a couple times I was so extremely embarrassed because there was a non-Amish customer who came back when I was cashier a couple times, and they were like, I got bread here and it was moldy. And we literally made that bread like the day before or 2 days before because it's too hot in there. You can't have a store like that, but they're still in business. They still do the same thing to this day. And then also what comes with that is flies and bugs. There was always flies flying around in the donut case, in the fry pie case, around our cookies, on our baked goods as they were cooling off. And we opened the windows in there because that helped with a little bit of ventilation. But in the summertime, we were so much busier, so we had to have the ovens on all day long. So let's say it was 80s and 90s degrees, plus the ovens on all day. It was just absolutely way too hot, especially for homemade food in an environment like that. I remember the pot holders that we used was so crusty, and the pot holders would always touch the food. And then we didn't have a timer outside where we baked things, so the bakery was never the same. It was always sometimes a little bit more harder baked, sometimes a little bit less baked. The lady who came early to make the donut dough and the bread dough, because it had to rise for longer, she almost never used gloves to do her work. And the dough would touch her apron all the time. Her apron was completely dirty. Now, since I have left the Amish, I have learned so much, and I'm still learning about food safety and about bacteria and stuff that is important that most people learn in school or at home. I believe one of the biggest reasons that the Amish children get sick so often is because of the food safety. One example, a lot of Amish, in our community it's gotten a lot better, but stricter communities and in older generations, they all had ice boxes. There's still some people in our community that have ice boxes. Basically, all that is like a cooler type of thing shaped like a refrigerator, and you put ice in there. It's not hooked up to something that will keep it cold like a traditional refrigerator. And so a lot of times the food in there would not be the temperature that it has to be. And no one knows the difference because no one's taught about anything. Now, nowadays, my parents have a regular refrigerator that's hooked up to propane. Our community, usually, most of them have that style refrigerator, thankfully. And then also, when you put cooked meat and raw meat in the refrigerator, it can't be right next to each other. I've never even heard of anything like that when I was Amish. We definitely did that. I remember doing it. My older brother, when he was in 4th grade, he got salmonella, and it was really bad. My parents took him to the hospital, and they figured out it had something to do with eggs. My brother was the one who took care of the eggs that our chickens laid. He would get the eggs and bring them in, and he was told to wash his hands, but maybe sometimes he didn't. But however it happened, I think it was because of eggs. Sometimes we had eggs that were not refrigerated for a long time, but it is important to refrigerate eggs because it slows down the bacteria growth. Eggs can contain salmonella and other bacteria, so that's why it's important to keep them in the refrigerator. Also, sometimes Amish would drink a lot of raw milk and do things with a lot of raw milk, but you have to handle it properly. Like, it is actually illegal to sell raw milk for a specific reason. Raw milk has to be pasteurized because it kills the harmful bacteria. So if you are consuming a lot of raw milk that is not handled properly, then you could definitely get sick a lot more. Something that we always did, I've seen it so often in the Amish, is when we cooked food for a meal or whatever, then we would keep it out of the refrigerator to cool off completely before we put it in the refrigerator. That's what I was taught. But actually, harmful bacteria can multiply rapidly at room temperature. You have to put it in the refrigerator after 2 hours of cooking. Sometimes in the summertime, an Amish home is a lot hotter, so you would actually have to put the food in the refrigerator before 2 hours if the room is too hot. Amish use traditional canning recipes, and it's usually passed down by their mother. My mom taught me how to can, but some of it is not safe. For low acid foods, you're supposed to use the pressure canning method, and for high acid foods, you're supposed to use the water bath canning method. I was never taught that in the Amish. I learned that on my own, watching videos and trying to teach myself things that are important after I left the Amish. Don't worry, if you go to an Amish store, the canned goods there are usually not made by Amish people, so you don't have to worry about that. But I'm just talking about my experience at home and growing up around Amish people, my Amish family, and canning in the Amish community. Let's go back to the baked goods. Baked goods have to be cooled completely before storing them in an airtight container to prevent bacterial growth, including Salmonella and E. coli. When I was working at the Amish bakery, there was many times where we actually packaged some of the baked goods before they were cooled completely because no one knew better. Raw flour and eggs have to be separated from foods that are already cooked. At the bakery in the back, we definitely didn't know that because we had our tubs of flour underneath the tables and we had a bunch of eggs that we would bring out of the refrigerator, and there was already cooked donuts and baked goods there on the tables as well as we were stirring the cookies together. At the Amish bakery, we were supposed to wear gloves when we handled food, but sometimes we didn't. We never had to wear a hairnet, but we did have our head covering on, so that helps a little bit. I also worked at a non-Amish bakery for about a month at a grocery store, and I learned so much there before I started even because I had to do a lot of training to learn food safety before I even started. We definitely had to wear hairnets when we were working there, and we definitely had to wear gloves. In the Amish, we often had leftovers that we would warm up to eat for a meal later on, and you're actually supposed to heat up your leftovers properly to 165 degrees to prevent bacterial growth. I never knew about that either. There's also a big misconception that Amish eat healthy. This was something that surprised me the most when I left the Amish and people were asking me questions. Because Amish diet consists of lots of bakery. We had bakery like every day of our life. And lots of dairy and meat and casseroles. Some people have asked about what is the secret ingredient in Amish food. Well, there is no secret ingredient, but there is more sugar and butter, especially sugar, in the ingredients and the foods that we would make. Also, for some reason, people think that the Amish make food completely from scratch. and that couldn't be farther from the truth. Not in our Amish community. Now, there might be a few stricter Amish communities that make more stuff from scratch, but as for the majority of the Amish, the old order Amish, they use a lot of stuff that anyone else buys at the grocery store to make their casseroles and their dishes that they make. Like, I never made homemade butter in my life or any dairy products that are homemade. We always bought it at the store. I never made homemade pasta, but I actually have a big passion for food. I love anything to do with food and cooking and baking, and I like healthy eating because I believe that food is medicine for our body. It is the nutrients and stuff that we need to have a healthy body. God gave us fruits and vegetables and herbs and other plants to eat. Food is our medicine. Healthy eating has all the nutrients that we need. In Genesis 1:29, it says, "Then God said, Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the surface of all the earth, and every tree which has fruit yielding seed, it shall be food for you." Genesis 9:3-4 says, "Every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you. I give all to you as I gave the green plant. Only you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is its blood." Not only can it be dangerous to consume meat with the blood still in it, God also wants to teach us respect for the sacredness of life. Blood is viewed as a symbol of life throughout the Bible. There is a lot of food that we made in the Amish that was really delicious. The food in the wedding was some of my favorite meals, the chicken there. My dad was amazing at grilling meat, and my mom was an amazing cook. I'm not saying that the Amish can't cook good food, because they absolutely can, and it is their tradition to make a lot of food. But it is also very important, especially if you are selling food to the public, to obey the health food guidelines, the safety of food, and be aware of cross-contamination and how to handle food properly. This is something that I don't think I've ever heard anyone else talk about, so hopefully you learned something new.